Thank you. Thank you. My name is Corbin Russell, and I am a high school math and science teacher, coming to you all the way from Nova Scotia. I want to thank everybody here for coming to my TED Ed talk tonight. I'm going to be talking to you about technology and assessment, how I've used technology for assessment in my classroom, and what the research says are advantages of using technology for assessment. Before we get into that, I want to talk to you about the two types of assessment. Most people here will be very familiar with the second type of assessment, but maybe not so much the first type. The second type people here will remember from school. The first type, maybe they didn't realize was happening. The first type is formative assessment. So what is formative assessment? I'm going to try to put this in a way that hopefully everybody will understand it. It is where you, the student, tells me, the teacher, what you know, but I don't put a grade on it. And you might be sitting there thinking, well, that can't be that important. If it's not graded, definitely it can't be important. But what it does, it allows us teachers to make sure that students have understood today's lesson before we move on to tomorrow's lesson. And we use it as a gauge on who's understanding and who's not, and if we need to re-explain the whole lesson, if we need to only re-explain one thing from the lesson, or if everything was good and we can move on. Now, summative assessment, that's where we take all those lessons, or 3 or 4 of those lessons, and we put them together, and we give you an assignment. We give you a quiz. We give you a test. You do that assignment, test, quiz, whatever, hand it in to me, the teacher, and I grade it. Again, it's you telling me what you know, but now I'm assigning a grade to it. Traditionally, these summative assessments, and even some of these formative assessments, look like this: pen to paper. Formative assessments, maybe right before you leave class, you're getting an exit slip. You're asking, one question about the lesson, kids are filling it out, handing it in, but you're not marking it, you're just seeing, did they understand the important question, that important topic, or topics. In math, here's 10 questions from the textbook that have to do with today's lesson. Do them. Don't hand them in. I'll be around to check. If you have questions, ask them. Tests. Here's, 30 questions on the unit. Do them on your own, quietly. Hand them in. I'll mark it. See how well you did. Now, what was noticed about these is sometimes students were reluctant to do them because, one, they weren't engaged with that type of material, with just the traditional pen paper. Number two, some students have anxieties about quizzes and tests and high performance, high stake type events. So I realized something needed to be done. I've been teaching for 10 years, and about 5 years into my career, I started talking to some people at the school board, asking them if there was other methods possibly for me to assess students. And I remembered that when I was in university, during some of my university classes, the professor would ask us a question during the lesson to see if we understood this important topic, and we would all respond using these clickers. So I talked to the school board, and sure enough, they had a couple class sets. So they offered me a class set of clickers. So I started using these clickers in my classroom. I'd use them after we talked about, at the end of a lesson, midway through a lesson, whenever an important topic came up, I would get students to use the clicker, respond to the multiple choice question. Each student had their own clicker. It had its own unique identity, so I knew which students understood it and which students didn't. And if more than a certain percentage of students didn't understand that lesson, we were going back and revisiting that entire lesson. But if most students, the majority of students did, I was checking in one-on-one with the students that didn't. This I found to be a much better method because now I was able to hear from all students and also be able to see exactly which students are getting it and which students aren't. Fast forward a couple of years. I hear about Kahoot. Kahoot is a web-based quiz type program that anybody can use from anywhere as long as they have internet access. So if you have a cell phone on you currently, if you have, in my classroom we use Chromebooks, we use Kahoot. So what that does is I'm able to, in the middle of the lesson, at the end of the lesson, I can ask students questions, and it's kind of more of a competitive head-to-head because their scores are coming up on the board, so they know who's in first and second, but they only know who the top like 3 or 4 are. You never know who the bottom are. Only I, the teacher, know who the bottom are, so you don't have to worry about, you know, hurting anybody's self-esteem here. But it makes it competitive, and it makes it more engaging for the students. The last thing that I really kind of use and utilize in my classroom is Google Forms. And I use Google Forms because, like I said before, with that test anxiety, students were having a lot of anxieties about writing quizzes on paper. But I noticed if you gave them the exact same questions on the Chromebook in the form of a Google form, they didn't stress out as much about it, and they were able to complete it a lot easier. So I switched a lot of my quizzes and tests to Google form format. And you might be thinking, well, that's pointless, and there's no advantages to that, and you're just some random guy from Nova Scotia telling me this. But the research tells me that there's advantages for formative assessment, and they are that I'm providing fast formative feedback. And why is that important? Well, it's important because right now, I could give each one of you a Kahoot, and we could talk about, and I could ask you questions about the difference between formative and summative feedback. And guess what? In that Kahoot, I would get the answers, and each one of you would get the answers right away. So you would know, yes, I understood it, or no, I didn't, and I, the teacher, would know, yes, you understood it, or no, you didn't. The other thing is, you can hear from all students. Before, if you're having a class discussion, or if you're circulating around to check to see what students are doing well in the practice problems, or in the class discussion, sometimes you don't have time to hear from every single student. You're only hearing from the same 5 or 6, or you're only getting to 10 or 11 students, and you have a class of 30, you're not being able to hear from every student, and you're not being able to check in to see if every student actually understands it. Again, when I use Kahoot, I can hear from all 30 students at once. And I can go back and I can look to see what percentage of questions each person got right. Again, there's like 300 people here tonight. I could ask you those questions on formative and summative assessment, and I can hear from every single one of you. And in my classroom, I know who hasn't answered the questions. Here tonight, I don't know most of you people, so I won't know who answered the questions right and who didn't answer the questions. You're able to make mid-lesson or mid-course adjustments. So when you're hearing from the students and you're in the middle of the lesson, right now I've just talked to my science students about the different trophic levels and what is an omnivore, what is a carnivore, what is a producer, what is a herbivore, that kind of stuff. During that lesson, I embedded in a Kahoot and asked students questions based on the different trophic levels. The different, is a rabbit an example of a carnivore, a herbivore, or an omnivore type thing? And if I notice a great percentage of my students in that class getting it wrong, then I know I have to go back and re-explain in a different way the differences between the different trophic levels. What is an omnivore again? What is a carnivore? And give more examples of that. So you're able to make those mid-course corrections, which really help students out. It's a lot more engaging. So with the pencil paper, it's not very engaging, it's not very exciting. With the quiz-based, technology-based, formative and summative assessments, it's more engaging. Students want to do it. Students want to pay attention. They want to do well on it. They want to see their name up on the board and be in first or second place. They want that. So they pay attention. They're not back snoozing in the back row having a little nap. They're actually paying attention and wanting and waiting for that time to come when it's time to check to see how they're doing on those concepts. Students do better on summative assessments. So we take these formative assessments and we do all these questions, and since they're paying attention and they're actually doing the questions, and since they get immediate feedback on what they've done right and what they've done wrong, and then they can check in with me or I check in with them on why did you get that wrong, and we can have a discussion about it, they then take all that information and do a lot better on their summative assessments. Advantages of summative assessment. Like I said, when I made that switch from pencil and paper to Google Forms, what I noticed is students weren't freaking out as much about the test or the quiz. So technology can help reduce test anxiety. It also, again, the same as formative feedback, it's instantaneous. You don't have to worry about kids always ask you, what's my grade, what's my grade, what's my grade, how well did I do on that? Because they know when they leave exactly how well they did and what they got wrong, and they know if they can change what they got wrong to do better on their next summative assessment. So if it's a quiz, they'll know how to do it for the test. If it's a test, they'll know how to do it for the exam, and so on and so forth. It also alleviates marking time for teachers. Teachers have a lot on their plate. They do a lot of things. They have to get lessons ready. They have to mark all the tests, quizzes, exams, everything. But when you do it on Google Forms goes ahead and marks it for you. Yes, you have to prepare the lesson and the quiz and tests and all the answers, but you have to do that for a paper copy as well. This way, the marking is done for you and you have more time to put into quality lessons. The last thing is, it can be done from anywhere. I know everybody here is very familiar with the COVID-19 pandemic. That happened. A lot of people were struggling with, how do I get summative assessments out? How do I get assignments out? How do I do any of this stuff? It can be done from anywhere, as long as you have an internet connection. So as long as the student is able to get onto the internet, they can go to the public library, wherever, to get internet access. They can do these assessments from anywhere. And I know nobody here is a stranger to, I'm not here, wasn't here that day, I was sick. It's already prepared, it's already ready to go. If they need to do it from home, they can do it from home. Or if they need to make it up during lunch, recess, whatever, it's there, it's ready to go. They don't have to come and ask you for it. They can just come into your classroom, grab their Chromebook, and do it. The last thing is, using technology for assessment is creating 21st century learners. It's giving them 21st century skills. I wasn't in university that long ago, and when I was there, we were using our computers to do our assignments and some of our assessments, and even some of my exams were on the computer. When you go off to college, same thing. When you're out in the workforce, you're using computers for everything. It's good to give them these skills with different technologies and different softwares and programs that they can use, so they can then take them out and become 21st century learners and give 21st century skills. The last thing I want to end with is this quote. If we teach today's students as we taught yesterday's, we rob them of tomorrow. And that comes from 1915, folks. I thank you all for listening. I thank you all for attending. I really appreciate it. Again, thank you.